Hello, this is Spellsquires MTG, and today I'm going to be showing you my Commander collection. Overall I have 6 decks, and I store them in this box. I made this box myself. It still needs a bit of finishing up because I haven't really had the time to finish it yet. I need to sand it down a bit and do a bit more to it, but it's mostly done. So I'm going to be going through my decks one by one, telling you a bit about what they do and then flicking through them quickly. And I store all my decks in an Ultimate Guard deck box, so they work in a Ultimate Guard box where I can take wherever I go with me, which can hold 2 decks. So first off is my Yidris Maelstrom Wanderer deck. This is a wheel deck, so our commander reads when it deals common damage to a player, we get to all our spells from our hand get cascade until end of turn. So we can generate value off this, off wheels. And we get to cast lots of spells for free. So we can play wheel spells. We've got a lot of benefits for these wheel spells, like Locust God. And we can also feel a bit mean by using things like Hull Breacher, where you can stop our opponents from drawing cards. We also have a Gnar set in this deck. We can have a bit of fun with extra turn spells, taking extra turns, cascading into a lot of the spells in our deck. Then we can use things like Brawl's Expertise. This casts 2 cards out of our hand, so we get a cascade twice, so we get a lot of extra value. And then creatures like a Moti give us extra cascade, so we get to generate more and more value over time. And then we also have a couple of 0 mana cost cards, which we can cascade to if we cast a 1 CMC. If we want to wheel, then we could possibly go into Wheel of Fate or an Ancestral Vision. I may take out Ancestral Vision if I only ever want to wheel. However, having 2 in there means you have a less likely chance of drawing them, so you always get to cascade off a card. I'm just going to do a quick flick through. I'll be showing these decks in roughly equal power level order. However, most of my decks are similar power level. This is one of the higher power leveled ones. This deck wins quite a lot, as it's often hard to interact with, and it often is very explosive. So on the early turns, you won't really look like you're doing much. People leave you alone, and suddenly you go off, and you can win very quickly. Next up is my Omnath Locust of Creation deck. Omnath generates value from you playing a land. So the first one, you get 4 life, second you get 4 mana, and third one you deal 4 damage to each opponent. So the more land drops you make, the more value we're going to get. So in the early turns, we're going to want to ramp a lot. With cards like Rampant Growth and Azusa, we get a lot of extra land into play with these. And then with things like Valakut Exploration, we get to draw extra cards from those. Play lands from our extra lands from our graveyard. If we have something like a Terramorphic Expanse, I don't have the expensive fetch lands in here, we can create a loop where we keep on searching our library for all our basic lands. With Azusa, so you get to put 3 lands into play and just keep on getting land drops over and over again. These extra land drops will allow us to create tokens with things like Omnath. And then Avenger of Zendikar will create tokens for each land you control. You can gradually pump these up. And then things like Triumph for the Horde. If we have a lot of tokens, we can give everything Infect and finish off the game with a lot less power than we need to. Often very mean card there. People often get angry when they get wiped up out early on in the game, so I try to leave it till later and kill everyone at once. So overall this deck's pretty powerful. You can often go off, get a lot of land into play early on, and get so far ahead that it's very hard for people to catch up with you. and you can often win pretty quickly with this deck if you draw the right hand, or you can just amass so many lands that your opponents find it very difficult to catch up. Next up we have my Daretti deck, which doesn't always go well. With this deck I often find I have a combo off, or I don't really do much. That is why with this deck I'm going to combine it with the Lorehold Precon to create more of a value-based deck rather than a combo deck. So Doretti allows us to fill up our graveyard with his +2 ability. It allows us to swap artifacts from our battlefield and our graveyard around. And then the ultimate is basically an emblem where it says you win the game, because all of your artifacts that go from the battlefield immediately come back at the end step. They find it very hard to interact with all your stuff, because if they kill it, it comes back again. And of course, unless they exile it. So, of course, in the early turns of this game, we're going to want a ramp. However, things like Goblin Welder are a perfect thing to run out, because it's just another copy of Doretti's -2, but better, because it's not going to die from it. We can use this to bring out big things like Mere Battlesphere pretty early on in the game, and create a large threat to start threatening life totals. They can use things like Duplicant. This is removal on an artifact where you exile stuff. You don't really get much exile in red, so very good there. Croclan Ironworks, we can sacrifice our artifacts and get mana from this. Then we have ways to win the game. Scrap Mastery and Sahidi's Directive. Scrap Mastery, you can fill up our graveyard throughout the whole game and bring it all back again. We can use Sahidi's Directive to reveal a lot of cards off the top. And then we also have our combos. So Dross Scorpion is used in a lot of the combos. Whenever an artifact or Dross Scorpion is put into the graveyard from play, you may untap target artifact. We can untap a lot of stuff with this card. Then we combo with cards like Basalt Monolith and Rings of Bright Hearth. Together, these two make infinite mana. We can tutor those with Coldrover Forge Master. And in combination with Dross Scorpion, it basically allows us to search our library for all the artifacts we need, because we can sacrifice it, untap it that many times, and then get the 3 combo pieces we need for the Rings of Bright Hearth and Basalt Monolith, and get a Staff of Domination to gain infinite life and draw infinite cards. If you want a more in-depth thing on combos, then watch my Daretti video. I have found a lot more combos since then, which I didn't realise were in the deck. And of course we can mind slave a lot of people if we really are feeling like an awful person. I did do that a couple of weeks ago to one of my friends and they were not happy. Overall, the deck can be very powerful, as you can combo off quite early on, or you can survive into the late game to recur a lot of artifacts. The reason I'm not the biggest fan of Daretti and why I'm switching it to Oskia the Recombiner is because Daretti is very weak against flyers, as people just attack directly into him. I do have a couple of decks which run a lot of flyers in my meta, so he's not always the best commander against those decks. Right, the last 3 decks are pretty equal power level overall. If people ask me to borrow a deck, I usually give them one of these, and I'll use another one if we just want a 1v1, as they are all pretty similar power level. I'll talk about my cheapest deck. I won't really call it budget, but it's not as worth as much as the others, which is Edrek Sar, Master Breeder. I do not, because I'm a stupid person, I did not buy the commander, so I've just got a card in a sleeve. I've got a swamp in there. This, I'll put the card on the screen, of course. This commander makes 1/1, so whenever you cast a creature spell, equals that spell's converted mana cost. And if you've got 7 or more, you have to sacrifice it. So if this deck, we're going to want to try and keep under 7 thralls, if we can help it. So, because the thralls are 1/1s, we can sacrifice them to Skull Clamp, quick Skull Clamp to them. They get plus and -1, they die, we draw cards. And then Species Specialist, we can name a thrall, and whenever one of them dies, we draw a card. We can make brilliant value engines with this, and generate a lot of value. Viserys here can be used to sacrifice them, so you get to draw cards or Species Specialist. And so later on in the game, we can use our benefits like Bastion of Remembrance, draining our opponents whenever a creature dies, and also to Comrade the Grim, because we kill off a lot of our opponent's creatures as well, so they're going to take a lot of damage from this. Things like Plaguecrafter allow us to control the board, where we can recur these and force our opponents to wipe all their creatures without really affecting us that much. We have a lot of recursion spells like Dread Return. This card's great because we can get back 2 creatures with it if we want to sacrifice 3 creatures. And we also want to play creatures, so if you cast the Evoke cost of this, the CMC is still 5. So we make 5 Thralls with this, which is very, very good. So 2 mana, 5 tokens, that's 5 more points of damage on a Bastion of Remembrance and a Sacrifice Outlet. And of course I have Bolus of Citadel in here because it's a hilarious card. And we can often cast a whole deck because we have things like Viscera Seer and Woe Strider, which allow us to scry when we sacrifice a creature, so we can bottom land cards we don't want. And always allow us to draw cards, and of course, because we have the Drainers, we can gain life back again to cast more spells. So overall, it's a very well made deck in my opinion. It often gets where it wants to go, but of course if you don't always draw the right part, so you don't draw a Sacrifice Outlet, you don't draw a damage thing, the tokens are kind of not really have much use unless you want to attack with them, which is always a possibility. My next deck is a Blink deck. This is Roon of the Hidden Realm. Josh Dequai favourite from the Command Zone. So this one we can pay 2 mana, tap it and blink a creature, so we exile it and return it to the battlefield being the next end step. So this deck makes a lot of use of leave and enter battlefield abilities. So of course we have ramp on enter battlefield creatures like Wood Elves. This gets us a forest. Then we're going to want to set up with cards like Wilderness Reclamation. This allows us to tap out on our turn, untap all our lands and leave mana open for counter spells and to activate Roon. Conjurer's Closet allows us to blink creature cards on our end step, so you get a lot of value from this. And things like Vizier of Tumbling Sands allows us to untap Roon, and it's also a ramp spell early on in the game, so you get to use Roon multiple times, and of course get him out earlier if we need to. Our removal is of course on blinkable creatures. Things like Reflector Mage bounce creatures to our opponent's hands and they can't play them. We've got other things which exile, fight when they enter. We've got a lot of good removal in this deck, about 10 removal spells, so you can control the board and sort of lock it down a bit. Muldrifter, when it enters we draw 2 cards, and you can evoke it for 2 and a blue. So if you evoke it, you can blink it with Roon. So it effectively costs 5, but we get to draw 4 cards from it. Very well-known blink card. Then of course we can set up loops where we blink Skullwinder to return the counter spells to our hand. Fierce Guardianship's definitely an outstander because if we blink this we can have enough mana to cast it, because Fierce Guardianship will of course be free. And then Skullwinder gets a card back from our graveyard. I only have 1 Eternal Witness, and that's in my Yidris deck, so that's why Skullwinder's in here, not as good, but it serves a purpose. And it can be political as well, so you can make deals with it. Progenitor Mimic, copy something when it enters and keeps out making token copies at your upkeep. This can be used on our best creature at the time, or an opponent's creature. And of course we can blink it if something better turns up. Revelark, in the late game, a lot of our creatures we'll have a lot of creatures in our graveyard, and most of them are less than 2 power, so we can then blink this, bring 2 back again, and we can keep on doing this until we fill up our board. And of course it's got the evoke thing again, however you wouldn't really want to cast it with evoke unless you haven't got Roon out or another blink spell, because you just have to sacrifice it immediately and you can't repetitively bring back stuff. This deck often gets where it wants to go. It does have a couple of pump spells in there, so you can pump up a lot of your smaller creatures and attack all at once. Things like Enraged Forerunners. However, I would like to get a couple more effects like that when I feel like upgrading that deck in the future. My last deck is Intet the Dreamer. This is a dragon tribal deck, my only tribal themed deck. Dragons are cool, they're big, and they're pretty funny when you smash someone for about 30 with a double strike dragon. So this deck needs a lot of ramp because our curve is very high, it's about 4 average CMC. So we're going to need to put a lot of lands into play. Things like Sky Shroud Claim are brilliant because they get 2. We also want to play cards which give our creatures haste and draw us cards when it enters. Intet is just a big dumb dragon really. However, if we do want a bit of card draw, we can pay 2 and a blue and exile the top card, and we can cast it without paying its mana cost. So if you put if we have a dragon there, we can cast it for 3 mana rather than 7 or whatever it might cost. So things like Halimar Depths are great because we can manipulate the top of our library, put the card we want there, and then get to cast it for 3 mana rather than 7. The dragons that we want to be casting are things like Utvara Hellkite. Whenever a dragon you control attacks, put a 6/6 red dragon creature token onto the battlefield. So this we can flood the board with dragon tokens and often win on the next turn, or if we can get an extra combat step, do that. Mentioning getting a lot of dragons on the battlefield, Clever Impersonator can be used to copy some of our better dragons, where we might only have one of in our deck. So we can use to double these up, and of course get multiple copies of our larger dragons. And a lot of the dragons care about having multiple dragons, like Scourge of Valkas, where it deals damage, where X is the number of dragons you control. And if you've got 2 of those, then we get double those triggers. Mentioning extra combat spells, sorry. This gives us an extra combat step. So things like Utvara Hellkite, we can get 2 combat steps and trigger all of our attack triggers again. I also do have the Lorehold deck as well, which I will be turning to Daretti. I'll probably try that out soon. I probably would have already tried it out by the time you're watching this, and probably converted Daretti into Oskia the Reconstructor, as I'm filming this a week beforehand, as I have some exams soon. I hope you enjoyed this overview of my Commander decks. I'll be linking the deck list to all of them in the description below. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.